is it then that there are more management problems in humanitarian work than in most sectors? Some of the reasons are, depending on the job market in the operating environment, that is the place where you're trying to intervene, or in the capitals, some managerial skills and experience may not be available. There's some contexts where people are in survival mode, they're not managing companies. So that's a consideration. And then as well, each cultural norm or each cultural environment, let's say, has different managerial styles. It's not that there aren't any managers, but they have sometimes managerial styles that don't kind of fit well with different international organizations' managerial culture, let's say. Also, for many, many years, it was the case that a lot of NGOs didn't give any importance to management, and also neither did donors. So there wasn't much available in terms of money to train, or, they just wasn't around. When I started, there wasn't that awareness, despite obvious problems in managerial competence in programs and projects, and as you went up the food chain. When it comes to international staff, there's often high turnover of experienced managers. Good managers often tend to move up quickly, or change organization, or leave the organization, or leave the profession. And that's a problem, because that means that sometimes it's the less competent managers who tend to stay, and then sometimes for too long, and then they move up. So there's kind of a trade-off as well here, and I'll talk about it a bit later as well. When good managers leave because of bad managers, let's say, I'm using those words, but let's say when more competent managers leave because of less competent managers, then that creates an imbalance, and then it's kind of a vicious cycle. High turnover is bad on a lot of levels, and negatively impacts many different things. And, I think in my experience, there's not that much efforts to do something about it. No? For many years, it was considered, at least in my experience, that it was kind of an inevitable thing that couldn't be changed, whereas people, despite this, would continually complain about it all the time. But ironically, in a way, high turnover is the cause of many problems, in not just high turnover, in poor program impact, poor analysis, etc., etc. I could go on, but this isn't about that. But ironically, high turnover is, as I said before, one of the main causes of high turnover. And this is because if you don't keep enough good people proportionally, eventually you will have a hemorrhage of people leaving because of incompetence, too much incompetence. When you put people, as I said before, into positions of responsibility when they're not ready in terms of either training or experience for those positions, that can have a very damaging effect, both on them and the people they manage and the people above them. And regarding this, there's something of a lack of organizational accountability around this, and this practice of putting people into positions they're not ready for because there's nobody else, basically, without making the necessary investments in training and retention to compensate this pushing people into positions before they're ready. So people are fast-tracked, and then they burn out because they've been put into positions that they're not ready for, and they haven't been supported enough to be able to manage them. If you put people into positions before they're ready, you have to really have the infrastructure to be able to compensate and help them manage what they're not ready to manage. So often the needs of the organization and their capacity to recruit and train and retain competent managers is not enough for the demand. Then, making this worse is the nature of humanitarian work, as it has evolved into much more complex setups, long chains of command, big teams, and the contextual challenges of humanitarian work are difficult. Depending on the organization, there is a mix of kind of like a military, not all organizations, just some of them, like a military style chain of command. And this happens particularly with organizations that are operating in more higher risk. And then a kind of a confusing mix of participatory style, no? So managers are aware that they have to make decisions really quickly. They sometimes have to make security decisions. But then there's also this kind of pressure as well to be inclusive and all of that. And that's kind of sometimes confusing for people, no? Because if a manager isn't competent enough to have developed different styles that are adapted to different situations, they will find it difficult to have a range of managerial competences that are adaptive, let's say, to each type of situation. And then the organizational culture, as I said, confuses people, no? Because it's not clear what is expected of people's managers, no? Both the people that are managing and the people that are being managed are confused often. Then there has to be a kind of a trade-off between too many layers. If there's too many layers, the organization needs more managers, and there's a shortage of managers, particularly good ones or experienced ones or competent ones. And if there's too few layers, that means that one manager has to manage too many people, and this causes overload dysfunction. What we have to remember is incompetent managers, sometimes through no fault of their own, breed incompetent managers. As I said before, it's like a vicious cycle, right? If you're managed badly, your model is the incompetence, therefore you will model the incompetence or try to do the opposite. It depends. So there is a cost organizationally, there's a cost to the population, there's a cost to the human resources of dysfunction and poor performance that's rarely talked about or addressed properly. Yeah. So complaining is not the same about talking about it or resolving it. Incompetence has a high cost, not just in terms of reducing the beneficial impact of humanitarian interventions and programs, but incompetence causes a lot of stress, burnout, it increases risk and contributes to misuse of assets, mismanagement of people, and I said before many times, usually competent people can only take so much of being managed by less competent people. It becomes too frustrating, so they leave. This means that sometimes there's a competence gap in the organization in general, and then, as I said, too many incompetent managers move up the food chain. And then if they invest in their skill sets and they have the aptitude and the right attitude and get the right feedback at the right time about the things they need to improve, or are inquisitive about it because many never even bother to ask, they stay at the same level, and this causes a lot of problems. Many humanitarians either leave humanitarian work because they're burned out, bad bosses, or become a bad boss themselves, or change organization. If you talk to humanitarians, it's the number one reason for people leaving is poor management at some level in the organization. They become either burnt out, dissatisfied, or demotivated and move on or move away, basically.